Eat it." Samuel's voice was hard, cold, without a trace of shame. Mama Grace's hands trembled as she stared at the bowl he pushed toward, her sour, smelly pig food, still steaming under the sun. "Please," she whispered, "I'm your mother. Why are you doing this?" "You disobeyed me," he said. "Today you will learn respect." She shook her head, tears gathering in her eyes. No one dared to move. No one dared to speak. They all went to their huts and closed their doors. But what he didn't know was this: karma was already waiting for him. Sit back as we dive into this heartbreaking story of cruelty, power, and a shocking twist no one expected. Mama Grace was 63 years old, and every year of that life was written somewhere on her body in the deep lines around her mouth that curved upward even when she was tired, in the slight stoop of her shoulders that had carried too many loads over too many years, in the rough, calloused palms of a woman who had never once been given an easy path. Mama Grace's compound sat on the eastern edge of the village. It was not a large compound, but she had kept it beautifully for decades. She grew cassava on one side, kept a small kitchen garden of pepper and garden egg near the back fence, and on the far right, separated from her main house by a low wire fence, was the pig pen her late husband Daniel had built 30 years ago. Daniel, she still spoke his name sometimes, quietly, when she was alone. He had died when their only son Samuel was just 9 years old. A sudden illness, swift and merciless, took him in the middle of the planting season. One week, he was laughing in the compound, teasing her about her cooking. The next week, the compound was full of women singing funeral songs. Mama Grace had buried her husband, wiped her tears, and kept going. She raised Samuel alone. She farmed alone. She sold at the market alone. She paid school fees alone, sometimes going without eating properly, just to make sure the fees were ready on time. She walked 4 kilometers to the village school every September to collect his report card and smile with pride at his teachers. When he needed shoes for secondary school, she sold her best wrapper to buy them. When he needed money for a school trip to the capital, she borrowed from her church group and paid it back over 3 months. She gave Samuel everything she had, everything, and for a while a brief golden, while it seemed to have worked. Samuel graduated from secondary school with decent grades. He secured a clerical job with a trading company 2 towns away and sent money home occasionally. He came back for Christmas wearing pressed shirts and polished shoes, and the village women said, "Mama Grace, your son is doing well. You suffered for him. And now see." She would smile and nod and say, "God has been faithful." But something had changed in Samuel, slowly, invisibly, the way mold grows on bread before you can see it. The money he sent home began to arrive, with conditions attached. He called less frequently, and when he did call, his tone had a new edge to it, an impatience, a hardness, as though her voice on the phone was an inconvenience to him. When he visited, he looked at her small compound with barely concealed contempt. He referred to her farming as "this bush life," and told her she was behind the times. He stopped calling her Mama and started calling her old woman, at first as a joke, then as a habit, then as something else entirely. By the time Samuel was 34 and had moved back to Cado after his trading company collapsed, the transformation was complete. He came back broke and bitter, and he brought his bitterness home like a second piece of luggage. He moved back into the main house, took over the largest room, sold 2 of Mama Grace's goats without asking her, and declared himself the head of the compound. He drank regularly, kept company with other idle young men who were equally resentful of life, and began speaking to his mother the way a man speaks to something he owns, with casual contempt, without warmth, without the slightest recognition of what she had sacrificed to put him in the world. Mama Grace said nothing at first. She prayed more. She kept her garden. She tended her pigs, 4 of them now, fat and productive, and sold the piglets twice a year for income. She moved through her days with her rosary in her pocket and a quiet dignity on her face, telling herself that Samuel was going through a difficult time, that God would touch his heart, that the boy she had raised was still somewhere inside the man he had become. She waited for that boy to return. He never did. The trouble began on a Tuesday morning in the dry season. The sun had barely risen above. The mango trees, when Samuel came out of his room, with sleep still in his eyes and fury already in his voice. The previous evening, Mama Grace had given 500 naira to their neighbour, a widow named Bisi, who had come knocking quietly at the gate with hungry children and a story Mama Grace could not turn away from. It was not the first time Mama Grace had helped Bisi. It would not be the last. This was simply who she was. But Samuel had seen it, and Samuel had opinions. "That money was meant for the house," he said, standing in the middle of the compound in his vest and shorts. "Who told you to give it away?" Mama Grace was already awake, crouching near her kitchen fire, stirring a pot of hot water for Pap. She looked up at her son calmly. "It was my money, Samuel. Money I earned from the pigs." "Your money?" He laughed, but there was nothing funny in it. "Everything in this compound is mine. You are in my house." "This is not your house," she said quietly. "Your father built this house." The word father did something to Samuel's face that was difficult to describe. It crumpled and hardened at the same time, like paper that has been crushed into a ball. He crossed the compound in 3 strides, and before Mama Grace could stand fully, he was standing over her. "Say that again," he said. "Say it again and see what happens." She did not repeat it. Not because she was afraid she was past fear when it came to Samuel, but because she recognized that something in him this morning was different, more volatile, like a fire burning close to dry grass. She turned back to her pot. Samuel left the compound and returned an hour later. He had been drinking. She could smell it on him from across the yard. He walked to the pig pen, stood looking at the animals for a long moment, then turned to her. "Come here," he said. She looked up from where she was, pounding pepper near the kitchen wall. "Samuel, I said come here." She set down her pestle, walked toward him, wiping her hands on her wrapper. He pointed at the bucket near the pen, the sour mash she had mixed the previous evening from leftover cassava peelings, fermenting grain, and water. It sat in the heat, pungent and thick, meant for the pigs. "Eat it," he said. She stared at him. "What? You want to give away my money to other people? Fine. Then you eat like the animals you keep." His voice was terrifyingly calm. "Eat it, Samuel." Her voice broke on his name, just slightly. "I am your mother. You disobeyed me," he said. "Today you will learn respect." She shook her head. tears gathering in her eyes. "I carried you, raised you, fed you. Enough!" he shouted. He grabbed her arm and dragged her toward the pig pen. The pig squealed loudly. Flies buzzed around the sour mash. The old woman's knees hit the dirt as she covered her face. Humiliated. "Eat," he repeated, dropping the bowl in front of her. What happened next was this. The compound gate was open. It was usually open in the mornings when people passed to collect water from the borehole nearby. And so when Samuel's voice rose above the compound walls, people heard it. A group of children stopped at the gate, their eyes wide. Two older women, carrying firewood on their heads, paused in the road. Rufus, the man who ran the small provision store at the corner, stepped out of his shop and looked down the road. And BC, the same BC who had received 500 naira from Mama Grace the evening before, appeared at the compound gate with her hands over her mouth. They all saw it. They all saw the old woman on her knees in the dirt, beside the pig pen, the bowl of sour mash in front of her, her son standing over her with his arms folded and a look on his face that none of them had ever seen on a man looking at his mother. Rufus started forward. Two of the women in the road called out, "Eh, Samuel, what is this?" Their voices high with shock. But Samuel raised a hand. "Mind your business," he said. "This is a family matter." The word family coming out of that mouth, standing over that woman, made something curdle in the stomach of every person watching. Mama Grace remained on her knees for a long moment. Then, slowly, with the resigned dignity of a woman who has endured more than most people can imagine, she reached for the bowl. She did not eat much. A small, reluctant mouthful, barely a taste, but it was enough. The act itself was enough. The image of her doing it, on her knees, in the dirt, with her son watching, was enough. One of the younger women at the gate, Ada, BC's teenage daughter, had her phone out. She had been filming for 40 seconds. She did not lower the phone. Samuel felt powerful. This is the honest truth about men like him. Cruelty, when it goes unchallenged, feels like strength. When no one stops you, when no one punishes you, when the person you are harming simply absorbs the blow and keeps quiet, it feels, in some dark and twisted corner of your mind, like you have proven something. Samuel felt he had proven something. He walked away from the pig pen with a slight swagger in his step, brushing dust from his hands. He went to the front of the compound, leaned against the concrete pillar by the gate, and lit a cigarette. The neighbours still lingered, watching him with expressions ranging from disgust to disbelief. He met their eyes without blinking. "What?" he said. "I am teaching discipline in my own house. Is that a crime?" No one answered. He exhaled smoke into the dry air. "She has been disrespecting me for months," he continued, as though the neighbourhood was his audience and he was its star. "Giving away money that belongs to this compound, making decisions without consulting me. An old woman cannot run a house. I am the man here. I am in charge." Rufus, still standing in front of his shop, shook his head slowly and went back inside. The older women dispersed, muttering to each other in lowered voices. BC lingered at the gate the longest, her eyes going between Samuel and the place at the pig pen where Mama Grace still sat, gathering herself in the dirt. "Go away," Samuel told her. "Your hunger is not my problem." Beezy turned without a word and walked back toward her own house. Samuel spent the morning moving around the village with a new energy that bordered on manic. He visited the gathering spot under the big neem tree, where the idle men of the village congregated a loose group that included a man named Tonye, who drank palm wine before noon, and a man named Chidi, who had not worked in 2 years and spoke loudly about everything. Samuel sat among them and talked. He talked about power and control. He talked about these old women who think they know everything. He talked about how his mother had been too free for too long, and how he had now put things in order. He did not detail exactly what he had done, but he implied it, and the men who heard it responded with uneasy laughter that was not quite laughter. Even Tonye, who was known for his shamelessness, looked away at one point and changed the subject. But Samuel did not notice. Or, if he did not care. By midday, word had spread through Cardo the way word always spreads in small communities, rapidly, thoroughly, and with embellishment. Some people had heard that Samuel forced his mother to eat pig food. Others had heard that he beat her and threw her into the pen. The version varied depending on who was telling it, but the core truth was consistent. Samuel had humiliated Mama Grace publicly, and the community, by and large, was horrified. Only one man seemed unmoved by the community's horror, and that was Samuel himself. He returned to the compound in the early afternoon, carrying a bottle of warm beer from Rufus's shop. Rufus had sold it to him with cold eyes and a tight jaw, but said nothing and settled into his plastic chair in the shade of the mango tree. Mama Grace was nowhere to be seen. She had gone inside. Good, Samuel thought. She was learning. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his legs, and listened to the compound settle around him. The pigs shuffled in their pen. A warm wind moved through the mango leaves. Somewhere in the distance, a woman was singing a hymn. The melody carried faintly on the breeze. Samuel drank his beer and told himself everything was under control. She found her place under the old guava tree at the back corner of the compound. It was her place, it had always been her place, even before Samuel was born, even when Daniel was alive, when the world pressed too hard and she needed to breathe. She came here. The roots of the guava tree had lifted the earth around it into small ridges and hollows, and she had worn a shallow depression into one of those hollows over the years, a seat made by her own weight and time. She sat in that hollow now, her back against the bark, her rosary looped through her fingers. She was not weeping any more. The tears had come and gone, quick and private. She had let them fall while her face was still hidden in her hands by the pig pen, and by the time she stood up and walked to the house to wash her face, they were gone. She did not believe in prolonging tears. Daniel had taught her that not by words but by example, by the way he always cleaned himself up and moved forward no matter what had come. She sat now in the shade, breathing slowly, her fingers moving bead by bead through the rosary. She was not angry. She was something more complicated than angry. She was grieving the son she had raised, the boy who had once clung to her skirt during thunderstorms and wept at his father's grave and eaten her food with such appetite and joy that she used to laugh just watching him. That boy was gone. She did not know exactly when he had gone or where he had gone, but she knew, sitting under the guava tree in the hot afternoon, that he was not coming back. And she was deciding something. She had been deciding it for weeks. Actually, slowly, incrementally, the way you approach the edge of a cliff, not to jump, but simply to see what lies below. She had been gathering information, quietly and patiently, in the way of a woman who has learned that patience is its own kind of weapon. She thought about the small metal box buried under the loose brick near the kitchen foundation, the box that Samuel did not know about, the box into which she had placed, over the course of 11 years, money saved from pig sales, from the sale of harvested cassava, from the occasional small envelope sent by her younger sister in Lagos, the box that contained a carefully folded document, the original land title deed for the compound, which was in her name, which had always been in her name, because Daniel had loved her and had put it there deliberately. She thought about Lawyer Ben, who operated a small office in the town 3 kilometres away, and who had given her his card at church 2 years ago and said, quietly and without preamble, "Mama Grace, if you ever need help, come and find me." She thought about Pastor Emmanuel at the church, who had visited twice in the past month after hearing rumours about the situation in her compound, and who had sat across from her in her kitchen and said, "You do not have to endure this. The Lord does not ask you to endure this." She thought about BC's daughter Ada, who had sat beside her at a church women's group meeting the previous Sunday and whispered, "Mama, I have something on my phone. Something that might help you. When you are ready, tell me." Mama Grace had not been ready then. She moved her fingers to the next bead. She was almost ready now. She sat under the guava tree and prayed, not for Samuel's punishment, not for his downfall, but for her own clarity, for the wisdom to know the right moment, for the courage to take the step when the step was needed. The pigs shuffled in their pen nearby, and she could hear them moving restlessly. They had been restless since morning, bumping against the fence slats, knocking over the water trough, grunting in a low, unsettled way that was unusual for them. She made a mental note to check the latch on the pen gate before night. Sometimes the dry season heat made the animals irritable. She said the last decade of her rosary. Then she sat quietly, listening to the compound breathe, and waited for the evening to come. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Ada's video had been shared in 4 different WhatsApp groups. This was the nature of village life in the modern age. Secrets no longer stayed secret, not entirely. The compound walls that once contained a family's shame now had windows built into them by the small glowing screens in people's pockets. What happened in Samuel's compound in the morning had been witnessed by a handful of people. By afternoon, it had been seen by hundreds. Ada had not planned to share it. She had filmed it instinctively, the way young people instinctively reach for their phones when something shocking happens, not always thinking through the consequences. She had gone home afterward, shown it to her mother, BC, and the two of them had sat together in silence for a long moment. "Delete it," BC said finally. "Mama, delete it. He will come for us. You know what he is like." Ada looked at the screen. The video was 40 seconds long. In it, you could see everything clearly. Samuel's face, his voice, the bowl, Mama Grace on her knees. It was undeniable. It was unambiguous. "I'm not going to delete it," Ada said quietly. "But I won't share it without Mama Grace's permission." She paused. "I'll send it to her first." But Ada did not have Mama Grace's number, not directly. She sent it to Rufus, who was one of the few people in the village who communicated regularly with Mama Grace when she needed supplies. Rufus, whose jaw had been tight since morning, who had sold Samuel that bottle of beer with the reluctant compliance of a man who wished he hadn't, opened the message, watched the video, and made a decision. He walked 3 doors down to the compound of Elder Matthias. Elder Matthias was 70 years old and had been the unofficial community authority in Cardo for 2 decades. He was not a chief, not a government official. He was simply a man of known integrity who had lived long enough and spoken wisely enough that people came to him when things went wrong. He had heard the rumours already. Now Rufus showed him the video. Elder Matthias watched it twice. He said nothing immediately. He handed the phone back to Rufus, leaned forward in his chair with his palms pressed together, and looked at the ground for a long moment. "Where is the woman now?" he asked. "In the compound," Rufus said. "He is still there too." Elder Matthias nodded slowly. "Get me Barrister Ben's number," he said. Samuel did not feel the ground shifting beneath him. "This is what arrogance does it. Insulates you from signals. It wraps you in the certainty of your own rightness until the moment when the certainty cracks open and the cold air rushes in, and by then it is usually too late." He spent the afternoon in his plastic chair, in and out of sleep, the empty beer bottle at his feet. At some point he woke and went to the kitchen to find food. The pot was cold. Mama Grace had not cooked an afternoon meal, which was unusual. He banged the pot with a spoon and shouted for her, but got no answer. He ate bread from the cupboard and went back to his chair. Around 4 in the afternoon, he heard the pigs. They were agitated louder than usual, a series of sharp, rhythmic squeals that was nothing like their normal feeding sounds. He ignored it for a while, then grew irritated enough to stand up and walk to the pen. The 4 pigs were milling aggressively, crowding the fence on one side. The water trough had been knocked over, and the floor of the pen was a slick mixture of mud and spilled mash. Samuel stood at the fence and looked in with mild irritation. "Stupid animals," he muttered. He did not notice that the latch on the pen gate, the simple hook-and-eye latch that Mama Grace had been meaning to reinforce for weeks, was hanging by a single rusted thread. He did not notice because he did not pay attention to the things Mama Grace maintained. He had never once helped with the pigs, never once cleaned the pen, never once checked the fence. This was her domain, invisible to him. He walked away. He went back to his chair and picked up his phone. There was a message from Chidi. "Bro, people are talking about you in the market." "Not good talk. You should come and see." He frowned at the screen. "What are they saying?" Chidi replied with a string of words that Samuel read 3 times before the full meaning of it landed. "Someone has video of what you did this morning with your mama. It is going around. People are vexed. Even Elder Matthias is involved. They say Barrister Ben is coming." Samuel sat up straight. He looked around the compound, the quiet, dusty compound in the late afternoon light, and for the first time all day, something cold moved through him. He stood up. He walked quickly toward the gate, intending to go find Chidi and understand exactly how bad this was. He did not look toward the pig pen as he passed it. He did not notice the way the rusted latch had finally given way under the animal's persistent crowding, the gate swinging silently outward on its hinges. He did not notice until he was almost at the compound gate, moving quickly, when the first pig came around the corner of the house at a trot. Samuel stopped. The pig stopped too for just a second, and they looked at each other. Then the second pig came around the corner, and the third. Samuel started, turning. His foot came down on the slick of spilled pig mash that had tracked out of the pen and spread across the red dirt near the corner of the house. His left foot went forward, his right foot went backward, and his body went neither direction in particular. He fell. It was not a gentle fall. He went down hard, the way a tall, arrogant man falls when the earth he thought he owned suddenly refuses to hold him, his elbow hitting the ground first, then his hip, then the full weight of him landing in the same sour, stinking mash he had made his mother kneel in that morning. The pigs, panicked by the sudden noise, scattered too toward the kitchen garden, one toward the main house, one out through the open compound gate and into the road, squealing so loudly that half the street turned to look. Samuel lay in the dirt, in the mash, in the smell, staring at the sky. His elbow sent a bolt of pain up his arm that told him something might be broken. His hip throbbed, and from the road outside the compound gate came voices, people already gathering at the sound of the squealing pig, already looking in, already seeing him. He heard one of them laugh, a short, uncomfortable laugh, quickly suppressed. He heard another say, "Is that not Samuel?" He tried to push himself up and slipped again, his palm skidding in the wet mash. He made a sound that was less than dignified. He finally got to one knee, then to his feet, and stood there covered in pig mash from hip to elbow, his face twisted with pain, and something else, something that had no name yet, something that was only just beginning to work its way from the edges of his awareness toward the center. Mama Grace appeared from around the corner of the house. She had heard the noise and come to see. She stood 10 feet away from her son and looked at him, covered in the same filth he had pressed her face toward that morning, the same smell on him now that he had tried to make her swallow, his arm hanging at a wrong angle, his face a mask of shock and pain. She did not smile. She did not say, "Times I told you so." She simply looked at him with eyes that held the whole long weight of 63 years and a morning on her knees and a lifetime of loving a child who had forgotten how to love her back. "The pigs got out," she said quietly. "I'll help you get them back in." Barrister Ben arrived at 5:20. He came in a small blue car with a cracked windshield and a briefcase on the back seat, accompanied by Elder Matthias, who sat in the passenger seat with a walking stick across his knees and a face that spoke of a man who had seen much and forgiven much, but had reached his limit. They found a small crowd outside the compound gate. The pig that had escaped into the road had been captured and returned with the help of 3 children who thought the whole affair was hilarious, and a man from the next compound who corralled it using a length of rope. The other 3 pigs were back in their pen. Mama Grace had relatched the gate with a piece of wire, making a mental note that a proper repair was now urgent. Samuel was sitting inside the house. His elbow had been examined by Mama Grace, who pressed her fingers along the bone carefully and determined it was not broken, badly bruised, possibly a minor fracture, but not the dramatic break he feared. She had wrapped it with a cloth strip and given him a tablet of pain medicine from the small first aid box she kept in the kitchen. He had accepted both the wrapping and the tablet without speaking. He sat now in the fawn parlour, staring at the floor, still smelling faintly of pig mash despite having washed at the outside tap, when Elder Matthias knocked and entered. Barrister Ben came in behind him, and behind Barrister Ben came Ada, holding her phone. Samuel looked up at them. He read the room in a single glance, the elder's hard eyes, the lawyer's measuring expression, the girl with the phone, and the cold thing inside him that had started when Chidi sent that message spread further outward, filling his chest. "Samuel," Elder Matthias said, settling into a chair across from him. He did not say it harshly. He said it with the exhausted gravity of an older man addressing a younger one who has done something that cannot be undone. "We have seen the video." Samuel said nothing. "We have also spoken with your mother," the elder continued, "and with several witnesses who were present this morning." He waited. Samuel still said nothing. "I want to ask you something," Elder Matthias said, "and I want you to think about it carefully before you answer." He paused. "What kind of man forces his mother to eat pig food?" The question sat in the room like a stone thrown into still water. Samuel's jaw worked. He looked at his hands, the hands that had grabbed her arm, that had shoved the bowl toward her. He looked at them as though seeing them for the first time. Barrister Ben set his briefcase on the table and opened it. He placed a document in front of Samuel, a single page, official-looking, bearing a stamp and a signature. "This is a copy of the land title for this compound," he said. "The property is registered in the name of Grace Adamu, your mother. It has been in her name since 1991 when your father registered it. This compound belongs to her, legally, formally, without dispute." Samuel stared at the document. "Furthermore," Barrister Ben continued, his voice professionally neutral, "the video now in wide circulation constitutes documented evidence of elder abuse. Under the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, this is a prosecutable offence. If your mother chooses to pursue legal action—" "She won't," Samuel said suddenly. His voice came out smaller than he intended, thin and worn. "She won't do that." "No," Mama Grace said from the doorway. They had not heard her come in. She stood at the parlour entrance, her wrapper neatly tied, her grey hair covered with a simple headscarf, her hands folded in front of her. She looked utterly composed, not the frail, trembling woman who had knelt in the dirt that morning, but something older and quieter and more complete. "I will not take my son to court," she said. Samuel exhaled. "But," she continued, and his exhale caught in his throat, "I will not continue to live as I lived today. Never again." She walked into the room fully and sat down, not in the corner, not in the small side chair she usually took when visitors were present, but in the central chair, the head of house chair, the one Samuel had claimed for himself since his return. She sat in it naturally, without drama, as though reclaiming something that had always been hers. "I have spoken with Barrister Ben this week," she said. Samuel's eyes darted to the lawyer, who gave a small, confirming nod. "And I have arranged the following. Samuel will leave this compound by the end of the month. He will find his own accommodation. He will not take anything that belongs to me. The pigs, the farming tools, the income from this land. He may take his personal belongings. She looked at her son. Her voice did not waver. If he refuses, Barrister Ben will file the necessary documents and the matter will be handled by the court. But I am giving him the choice first, because I am his mother. And even now, I am still his mother. The room was very quiet. Elder Matthias looked at Samuel. Ada looked at her phone, then put it away. Barrister Ben straightened his papers. And Samuel sat in the chair, across from his mother, covered in the residue of a day's worth of arrogance and pigmash and pain, his arm throbbing, his name dirty in every WhatsApp group in Cardo, and he looked at the woman in front of him. He had not truly looked at her in a very long time. He saw her age. He saw her tiredness. He saw the quiet, unbroken thing in her eyes that he had tried to break that morning and had failed. Because you cannot break a thing like that. A thing made of decades of loving and enduring and pressing forward despite everything. You can knock it to its knees. You cannot break it. He also saw, somewhere beneath everything else, her grief. Not anger, not triumph, grief. She grieved him. She still grieved the person he should have been. Something in Samuel's chest did a strange, painful thing that he did not have words for. He looked down at the floor. "I'll go," he said. His voice was barely audible. "I'll go by the end of the month." The weeks that followed were not without difficulty. Samuel left, as he said he would, though not gracefully, not without resentment, not without a week of sulking and slamming doors before he finally packed a bag and went to stay in a single room above Tonya's sister's house on the other side of the village. He did not apologize. He did not speak to his mother directly as he left. But he left. And with him went the weight that had pressed down on the compound for months, the constant vigilance, the walking on eggshells, the calculating of his moods, the bracing for the next eruption. When the compound gate closed behind him and the sound of his footsteps faded down the road, Mama Grace sat down in the courtyard and breathed. Just breathed. The compound felt different immediately. The air in it was different. Even the pigs seemed calmer. Bisi came that evening with a pot of soup, and her daughter Ada, and the three of them sat in the courtyard and ate together in the cooling evening air, and Mama Grace laughed for the first time in what felt like months, a real laugh, full-bodied, rising from somewhere deep in her chest and escaping before she could contain it. At something Ada said about the escaped pig, it felt extraordinary, that laugh. It felt like water on cracked ground. Rufus sent a small bag of rice through Bisi the following day with a note that read, "Mama Grace, we are glad you are all right. The street is yours." It was unsigned, but she knew his handwriting. Pastor Emmanuel visited and prayed with her in the kitchen. Elder Matthias stopped by, accepted a cup of tea, and told her with simple dignity, "You handled that with more grace than most would have." She smiled at him. "It is my name," she said. The metal box was retrieved from beneath the loose brick near the kitchen foundation. It contained more than Samuel or anyone really would have guessed. 11 years of careful, consistent, saving, augmented by the land deed she held and the unexpected news that Barrister Ben delivered in his office the following week. A long-forgotten government resettlement scheme from the 1990s, linked to a plot of land her late husband Daniel had registered on the village outskirts, had been activated by new development in the area. She was owed compensation, significant compensation, for that land. Daniel, from wherever he had gone, had left her something after all. She sat in Barrister Ben's small office and looked at the figure on the document for a long time. Then she folded it carefully, placed it in her bag, and walked home in the late afternoon sun. She did not tell Samuel. She did not need to. He did not escape the video. In a small village, there is nowhere to escape. It followed him into Rufus's shop, where conversation stopped when he entered. Into the church, where people shifted slightly in their pews. Into the gathering under the neem tree, where even Tonye and Chidi fell quieter than usual when he sat down, and the laughter was strained and surface level and hollow. The women of the village were the hardest. Women always are in matters like this. They did not shout at him. They did not make scenes. They simply looked at him, or rather, looked past him with the particular expression of women who have lived long enough to know what a man like this is capable of, and have decided that he does not deserve even the dignity of their contempt. He felt it. He felt it in ways he would not admit. He drank more for a while. He stayed indoors more. He sent messages to his old friends in the city, considering options, considering escape. But the city was not calling him back. His bridges there were burned too, in the way that bridges burn when you are a man who has treated every relationship as a resource to be used. He was alone in a way he had not expected to be. And into that aloneness, slowly and unbidden, in the quiet hours of the morning before he rose, in the space between sleep and waking, where a man cannot hide from himself, crept the image he could not shake, his mother on her knees, not in anger, not as accusation, not as evidence of his wrongness, but simply as image, as memory. The thing he had done existing in the place where the things you have done always eventually live. He saw it clearly in those quiet hours. He saw what he had made of himself. It did not transform him overnight. Men like Samuel do not transform overnight. Real change, if it comes slowly the way the dry season ground softens when the first rains arrive. It does not happen all at once. It happens inch by inch, quietly, almost invisibly, but the beginning of change, the first, small, genuine crack in the armour of arrogance that had happened. It had happened on the floor of the compound, in the pigmash, staring up at a sky that did not care about his power. 6 weeks after Samuel left, Mama Grace hired a young man from the village Kola, the son of a farmer she had known for years, to help reinforce the pig pen fence, repair the compound gate, and clear the back section of land she intended to expand her cassava planting. She paid him fairly. She fed him lunch each day. She told him how she wanted things done, and he did them. She reopened her account at the village cooperative, which she had stopped using when Samuel started monitoring her finances. She made her first deposit a substantial one, and the cooperative chairwoman, a sharp-eyed woman named Mama Sule, looked at the amount, looked at Mama Grace, and said simply, "It is good to see you." She resumed her role in the church women's group, which she had been withdrawing from gradually as the situation at home consumed her energy. She sat in the front row at the first meeting she attended and sang louder than she had in years, and several of the younger women noticed and commented on it afterward. "You look different." "Mama Grace," said one of them, a young teacher named Funmi who taught at the primary school. "I feel different," Mama Grace said honestly. She did not explain further. There were things that did not require explanation. She wrote a letter to her sister in Lagos, a long one, by hand, in the careful penmanship she had maintained since primary school. She described, briefly but honestly, what had happened. She described what she had done about it. She described how the compound felt now, in the mornings, when she sat with her tea in the courtyard before the day began and listened to the birds move through the mango tree. "It is quiet now," she wrote, "not the quiet of fear, where you are holding your breath waiting for the next thing, the other kind, the good kind, the kind that means peace." She sealed the letter, put a stamp on it, and asked Kola to post it when he passed the market. Then she went to check on the pigs. There is a tree on the eastern edge of Kado village, an old Iroko, wide-trunked and ancient, whose roots have broken through the surface of the earth in great arching curves that children use as seats and old women lean against when the afternoon heat grows heavy. Mama Grace does not walk to that tree. It is too far for her knee on bad days, but she knows it is there. She knows it has stood through droughts and storms and the passage of generations, and it will stand through more. She thinks of herself a little like that tree now. Not in arrogance, she is not a woman given to arrogance, but in quiet recognition. She has endured, the roots held. She is still here. Samuel came, eventually. Not soon, not in the first weeks or even the first months, but one evening in the rainy season, when the compound was soft and green and the air smelled of wet earth, there was a knock at the gate. She opened it and found her son standing in the rain without an umbrella, his shirt darkened with water, his face holding an expression she had not seen on it in a very long time. She let him in without speaking. She brought him inside and gave him a towel and a cup of tea. He sat across from her at the kitchen table, the same table where she had fed him as a child, where she had helped him with homework, where she had once sat up all night with him when he had a fever and she was terrified of losing him, and he held the cup in both hands and looked at it. "I am sorry," he said. 2 words. Quiet ones. She looked at him for a moment, the man he was, the boy he had been, the long distance between them, the longer road back. "I know," she said. She did not say times "it's all right," because it was not entirely all right, and she was done pretending that things were all right when they were not. She was 63 years old, and she had earned the right to honest speech. But she also did not turn him away. She poured him more tea. They sat in the kitchen as the rain fell on the zinc roof above them, filling the silence with its steady percussion, not uncomfortable silence, but the kind that holds room for the slow, difficult work of repair. Outside, the pigs shuffled contentedly in the reinforced pen. The cassava grew quietly in the dark. The compound gate, newly hinged and properly latched, held firm against the wind, and Mama Grace sat at her kitchen table in the home that bore her name on the deed. In the life she had built and protected and reclaimed, and drank her tea. The moral lessons. Cruelty is not strength. Control is not love. The person you demean today is not diminished by it, you are. Power built on fear is borrowed power. It belongs to you only as long as no one calls its bluff. The moment someone, a neighbour, a teenager with a phone, an old woman with a metal box, and a lawyer's card refuses to be afraid, that power dissolves like salt in water. What lasts is what Mama Grace had. Not loudness, not dominance, not the ability to make others afraid. What lasts is the quiet, persistent refusal to become something small. What lasts is the dignity that no one, no sun, no circumstance, no bowl of sour mash pushed into your face can actually take from you, because it lives not in the eyes of others, but in the choices you make in how you carry yourself. Samuel fell in the pig mash because the ground he was standing on was never as solid as he believed. Mama Grace rose from the pain, dirt, because the ground she stood on, her values, her faith, her community, her patience, herself had never once stopped holding her. This is not only Mama Grace's story. It is the story of every woman who has smiled through cruelty and kept going. Every parent who has loved a child who forgot how to love them back. Every person who has endured humiliation with grace and quietly, methodically built the life they deserved. To all of them, the ground is still holding. Rise. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss our next powerful story. We bring you real-life stories of struggle, survival, and triumph that will inspire you, move you, and remind you of the strength within you. Coming up next, we have another incredible story that will leave you speechless. You won't want to miss it. Like this video, drop a comment below and tell us what moment in this story resonated with you the most. Have you or someone you know faced a situation where neighbours or community turned their backs when help was needed most? Share your thoughts. We read every single comment. See you in the next video. God bless you. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications.